And welcome to the Go Earn It podcast. I'm your host, Shane Sparks. It is episode number 16 of the Go Earn It podcast. Today, we are joined by four-time All-American, three-time Big Ten champion, two-time national champion, 155 wins. And that Maroon Gopher singlets, he ended his career by winning 76 straight and was very successful in his MMA career. We welcome King Cole Konrad. Cole, I am so excited to talk to you tonight. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate you having me on.
Cole, it is Big Ten Championship week. You are accustomed to the Big Ten Championships. You placed 4 times. You won 3 Big Ten titles. Correct me if I'm wrong, that first one was in 2005. What do you remember from standing atop the podium for that first time claiming a Big Ten crown?
Oh, man. Honestly, I probably had my sights set on the NCAA tournament at that point. So, I mean, that was a stepping stone in the right direction. And don't get me wrong, definitely pumped to win it. Super tough tournament, great competition all over the place. And it was a battle, but it was, I had my sights 2 weeks out. And so it was a good feeling, but it was, I still wasn't done. So.
How did you deal with staying focused, not, looking ahead, not getting complacent? Because it's one thing to get to the top. It's another thing to stay there. You got to the top and you stayed. When you look back at it, Cole, hard to believe almost 20 years later, what are a couple of things now as a more mature adult where you can look back and say, you know what, I maybe wasn't super intentional in doing this, but it was something that I naturally was able to execute?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, it was always just a personal challenge. Like the guy across from me, I mean, that was what it was. Respected the opponent, of course, but it was more of a challenge to myself. Can I get better? Can I push the pace? Can I win the match? Can I win the position? And just build on it. And it was, it started in the practice room when I was there to drill. I was very intentional with my drilling. When I was there to condition, I was intentional with my conditioning. And when I was out there to wrestle, I wasn't focused on, necessarily winning X, Y, Z. Obviously, the NCAA title is the goal, and that's what you have your sights on. But it was very deliberate to look no more than a foot in front of my face and deal with the task at hand and do the best I could at that. And I knew the repetition of that would get me to where I wanted to be. Or I believed. I believed
Sure.
that it turned out in this instance, yeah.
What was the key to your drilling, Cole?
No detail is too small. An inch is a mile in wrestling. If you're slightly out of position, you're giving up points. So, and it was really just breaking it down slowly, doing it correctly as best as I could. And then obviously with the repetitions, the speed picked up, but it was really just, I didn't care if I got 200 reps in the day. If I got, 20 in as good as I possibly could, that was more important to me. Just make it a habit to do it right. So,
what was your intro to wrestling?
Oh, I started at a young age. I had an older brother, and my dad both my parents were super involved, but started when I was like 4, going to our local youth wrestling club. My dad was coaching there, and so I was just kind of always hanging around the mat.
What was it about the sport that made you stick with it and have the success you did?
It was just kind of what we did growing up. So, I mean, I guess it never even crossed my mind to do something else, really. And don't get me wrong, there's stretches in there where I wasn't having a ton of success. It wasn't necessarily fun to go to practice. But I definitely developed a love for it, and it just continued to get stronger and stronger as I got into high school and then into college, where I did enjoy practice, and not that there weren't bad practices or I practiced poorly, but it was like I looked forward to it because I knew that's where the games were happening, and it was just kind of always a constant personal challenge to try to get a little bit better all the time. So
I've heard you say it already a couple of times in this interview, talking about it had to come within. You had to have the passion yourself. It wasn't anybody else just crashing down on you. You made it about yourself. That's where the motivation came from. Expand on how important and critical that was.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you're getting pushed, you eventually push back, right? But if you're pushing yourself, it's a totally different category, and you're pushing yourself forward, trying to excel. And I was very fortunate to have very good people around me. Growing up, I had a good support system. When I got to college, the coaches were the right fit for me. I had a lot of faith in them. They had a lot of faith in me. And, they weren't pushing me to do things. They were telling me this will help you get to this. And that was the ultimate goal, was to win national titles. And I believe what they were telling. So that was the correct course of action. So I just did what I was told. And then, the little things, when they're saying, the morning practice, the evening practice, that's what everyone's doing. If you want to be special, you got to do extra. I believe them. So I did extra. And I made it a habit. I did extra daily. I didn't do it, once a month or once a week. It was very deliberate every day. Do the little extra before, do the little extra after, get an extra workout in after that. So, yeah, I don't know. It was just, that was my goal. That was my sight. And to be totally honest, I probably wouldn't even went to college if it wasn't for wrestling. Like I cared about wrestling. I wanted to continue to wrestle. And I was basically in college to wrestle. And I mean, I enjoyed class, whatever, especially towards the end. I really did enjoy it. But in the first couple of years, couldn't have cared less if I went to class. I was there to wrestle.
And you, Cole, you were from New London, correct? That's where you started your high school career, and then you went to Freedom?
Correct. Yeah. Actually, freshman year, I was in Turlock, California.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was out there. My dad works for some, at the time he was working for California Dairies out there. He works for some different dairy plants. So we were out there my freshman year, and then moved back to Wisconsin. I grew up in Wisconsin primarily, and then moved back, lived in New London, was there sophomore, junior year, senior year, went over to Freedom. Yeah.
How many state titles you win in Wisconsin in high school?
One.
Just one state title.
Yep.
And that was that your senior year?
It was, yep.
What was it like winning a state title, getting, checking that off your list?
Yeah, that was that was super exciting. Obviously NCAA titles were great, but that was kind of my first championship of really any sort, other than a couple like Northern Plains, which I thought was the kids nationals. I didn't realize it was a regional national. I thought that was the end of the line growing up. So yeah, winning that was kind of my first championship, and super exciting. It was a great way to cap off high school. So
you win one state title.
Yep.
What was the college recruiting process like?
Well, so obviously I didn't have a ton of accolades, so I wasn't really heavily recruited. Going into my senior year was the first time I wrestled at Fargo, kind of the first time I knew what Fargo was. And I don't know if it's true, but I just assumed my dad kind of hid the ball on it with me a little bit, didn't tell me about it until he thought I was good enough to actually do something there. So I went out to Fargo after my junior year, wrestled freestyle and Greco, got second in Greco, fourth in freestyle, in a fun bracket. Actually, the freestyle bracket was super fun. It was Steve Mocco, Cain Velasquez, Greg Wagner, me, and then NCAs flip-flop the order, but the four of us were there for a couple of years in college. So that was interesting. That was my first taste running into a couple of those boys. So it was cool. So I hadn't had really any high school success to that point. Had a fair amount of success at Fargo that year. And so I came back without winning a state title, and I was like first team All-America. So then people started calling, and I mean, they weren't like offering scholarships because I was still very much a wild card. Like, yeah, he had a good weekend basically. So I signed for books at Minnesota, which was, $500 more than I thought I'd get anywhere. So just gave me an opportunity to go wrestle.
Wow. If you hadn't gone to Minnesota, Cole, where would you have gone?
Like college-wise to wrestle?
College-wise.
Well, I went and visited Wisconsin, which it was great coaching staff, great school. But for me, I wanted to focus on wrestling, and I had a lot of friends in Wisconsin that were going to University of Wisconsin, and I knew I'd get distracted, and I didn't want that. If I was going to go wrestle, I wanted to wrestle. And then the heavyweight before me at Freedom, he graduated before I got there, but grew up just down the road from him. He also transferred into Freedom. Garrett Lowney, he was the heavyweight before me at Minnesota. Very close with his family. It was actually, I think his dad, Steve, was the one who reached out to Marty and Jay and said, hey, he's probably worth bringing up on a visit. And obviously he had a bunch of success coming right out of high school. He got bronze at Sydney Games in 2000 when he was like 19. And I was like, well, obviously look at the success he's had going there. I want to accomplish some stuff. And it just seemed like the natural progression. And actually my junior year, was the first time I ever saw college wrestling. I went to NCAAs on Iowa City, and Minnesota had 10 All-Americans. And I was sitting in that crowd. And that just kind of flipped the whole switch. That really refocused me as far as like, I enjoyed wrestling, but I didn't really know, I hadn't seen college wrestling. So I didn't know that level. I had never seen that before. And then when I saw it, I was like, I need to do that. So that was really when everything got a lot more serious. And in the gains that took place basically from NCAAs, I mean, 2 weeks earlier, I finished 4th at my high school state, went and saw that, got super focused, 3 months later, finals of Greco, 4th place in freestyle at Fargo, and then just continued to build. So
This stuff to me is absolutely fascinating, Cole. It's amazing. Everybody's got a story. From what you just said, I want to ask you a couple of questions. I'm a big believer in kind of what you said before. If you're going to do something at that level and you want success, you can't have, in my opinion, you did it, you know it. You can't have a whole lot of balance. It just takes like 100% of yourself. You got to be selfish. Describe to me what your commitments, and be real honest if you could, your commitments and your lifestyle while wrestling in college pursuing NCAA titles.
Yeah, I mean, I was all in. And I know a lot of people say that, but I mean, I was selfish. You could probably ask my family. I was probably short with them. I was kind of a dick for most of college, because if it interrupted what my schedule was or my plan was, it wasn't happening. So even, Christmas falls during the middle of wrestling season. Well, I'm not going home for 4 days for Christmas, because then I would miss 3 days of practice. So I would work out Christmas Eve, and then I would head home, spend Christmas morning, and then by noon I was in the car headed back to work out Christmas night. And it's an interesting balance, because obviously the reward at the end of it from a wrestling standpoint was great, but I mean, definitely a certain level of isolation too, just isolating myself from friends and family for a goal. And my parents were really supportive, my brother as well, but a lot of people didn't understand it and just thought it kind of turned into an ass. But it was like, no, I have a very short window to get the things done that I want to get done, and I'm not going to get distracted by, going out and having fun with buddies. It's not that you're not my buddy or that I don't want to, but I want to do this more. So this is what I'm doing. So I don't know. It was just laser focused on the end game, and I was not going to get pulled sideways by anything. So
what is your first memory of meeting Jay Robinson?
So I mean, I met him on my recruiting trip. Now he's old, so he won't even remember it nowadays. But I just remember walking in the first time I met him. I'm like, I didn't know college wrestling. I didn't know who Jay Robinson was. I just thought he was an old guy who's a good coach. So that was kind of my first initiation. Meeting him, obviously he's sharp. He's got a lot of different philosophies on things, and things that made sense and really stuck with me. And he was charismatic. Like when you walked in there and you're, just as a high school kid, especially someone who was in a very foreign environment at that time for myself, and felt super comfortable, knew that was a guy that was gonna push you, but watch out for you too. And then on the flip side, I turned around, there's Marty Morgan staring at me with his big bald head looking all mean. And I was like, Jesus, get me out of here. So that still happens quite a bit when I run into him, but
What's the most impactful conversation that you and Jay Robinson ever had?
Oh, goodness. That's super tough. I mean, the one that hit home early was, well, I wasn't really going to class a whole hell of a lot when I was a freshman. I was really just wrestling, and that was about it. And he just sat me down. He said, "Look, there's three components to college. There's wrestling, there's academics, and there's a social life. There's not enough time in the day to be good at all three. Pick the two you're going to be good at, and if wrestling's not one of them, don't come back." And it kind of straightened me up a little bit, because when I was in my redshirt year, I was putting in a ton of work wrestling, having fun socially. Class was kind of on the back burner, but he just let me know, like, if you don't pick wrestling and academics, you're gonna have plenty of time for social life, because you're not gonna be in school here. And that was that was probably at the end of my first semester in my redshirt year. And kind of from that point on, I really started getting a lot more diligent with my schoolwork. My training was good, but it always needs to be refined, right, and improved. And that really kind of put it all in focus for me. And he was right. I mean, heck, I came in with 11 or 12 freshmen, and I think only 2 of us graduated. Still on the team. A number still graduated from college, but they didn't graduate with the team. So.
You got another Jay Robinson story? We could probably talk about Jay for hours, but do you have another story that stands out to you? Put you on the spot a little bit?
Well, I mean, I've had tons of crazy ones with him, but I don't know why it stands out, other than I lost like $20 to him once driving back we were coming from the Edinburgh intensive camp. We got to Chicago. He bet me $20 he could drive from Chicago to Minneapolis with just his knees. And I don't know why I took the bet. I mean, it was a terrible idea. And yeah, he did. He drove back with just his knees, and I lost $20. So that one still sticks. But yeah, no, I just saw him the other day, actually. So we have our high school state tournament this last weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then Sunday we host a youth tournament at the high school that I coach at, and it's the J-Rob Youth Classics, and so he comes out for that. So yeah, just got to run.
How much did he impact your life?
Oh, he impacted a ton. I mean, beyond just the wrestling, Matt. I mean, just how to approach different challenges in life. Obviously, you learn a lot of things through wrestling that can help you through that. But he just always had a good way of putting it in a perspective that stuck with me, and how he would word things. And you carry that stuff with you all the time. You face challenges at work or with your spouse or your children, and just how you handle it and react. Kind of how he handled a bunch of young college kids with his words and actions, and then also following it up with a certain level of compassion, and it sticks with you. You learn how to get people to respond and things like that, and you also learn how to attack difficult situations head on. So definitely pulled a lot of stuff from him.
How did you do in the room, Cole, when you got to Minnesota as a freshman?
I scored my first takedown late November. Yeah, so it went about 2.5 months without scoring any points. So that was fun. It progressively got better. I mean, obviously you get that first takedown and you just assume you're going to get another one within the next 20 seconds, which didn't happen, but they started coming more frequently, and it was a big adjustment. I would say I was probably your more prototypical decent high school wrestler. Welcome to a college room. You're back to being a middle schooler, basically. And you got to put in a ton of work to make up that ground. Obviously the level of high school wrestling right now is through the roof, and some of these guys can compete instantly. And there was a couple, like Dustin Schlater was on my team, came in as a true freshman NCAA champ. But that was the anomaly. That was not the norm. And I was very much not at that level when I walked in. I had a ton of work to do, and both physically, mentally, and just wrestling wise, technique wise. So yeah, it was a huge adjustment.
Who are the guys that were putting it on you?
Well, Garrett Lowney, Marty Morgan, Tim Hartung, pretty much every day. Whatever one, I guess, lucked out and drew the right number or whatever, got to kick the crap out of me for the day. And then they would just alternate. But it was good.
You got to Minnesota. Who are the most impactful teammates that you had?
Ooh, good question. So my true freshman year, we had a really good senior class in Minnesota. Jared Lawrence, Luke Becker, Lowney. I know I'm forgetting some, but Damian Hahn was a junior at the time, and all those guys, fantastic wrestlers. I would say I really connected with Becker and Lawrence. They were very good mentors for me. A little bit younger mentor to me, and so a really good friend, Matt Nago, 1 year ahead of me. He was All-American at 165. But he was just kind of your journeyman. He put in the work. He was always busting his butt. He'd wrestle 184 for the team if we needed it. He'd drop to 157 a week later if we needed it. Like, he would do any and everything for the team, for his teammates. And seeing that example in his freshman year, so he was 1 year ahead of me, he redshirted, and then his freshman season, that's what he did. He bounced between 57 and 84 all year. Obviously way undersized, 84. But he went out there and just fought like hell, and always had a good attitude about it, and did what he could for the team. And I would say him by example was really good for me. One thing that was really smart that Jay did was the first 2 years of college, you're in the dorms. You only have to be 1 year. But he made the wrestlers stay in there 2 years for that reason, so that you were around guys who'd been in the system, knew how to do things right, because he was good at weeding people out real quick if you weren't going to be a fit. So the guys by year 2, they were dialed in. They were up at 6 for their morning workouts. They were, following an appropriate diet. They weren't doing a bunch of BS during season. They were focused in. So for me, Matt Nagel was probably the closest to me in the dorms, led by example, and he's just a good guy. So yeah.
During some of those tougher times at the beginning, getting to Minnesota, how did you battle through it? I mean, do you remember some of those dark times? How did you get through it when it didn't look so good?
Probably just had too much pride. I wasn't going to go home and say I got beat. And I wouldn't admit it to myself. So, there was only really one option: figure it out and sit here until you do. And there were, definitely a lot of dark times. Lost some really bad matches in my freshman season, but the matches were what they were. I don't even care. I couldn't even name people that I lost to during that time. But the wrestling room is where it was getting put on you, and you felt like shit, and they're running you into the mat and really making sure you felt it, and they're leaving feeling good about themselves. But yeah, there just was, in my mind, there was no alternative. You're seeing how far you have to go every day. Let's get a little bit closer, and eventually pass them by and put their face in the mat. And that was just kind of the day in, day out mentality. And I mean, there just wasn't a different option in my mind. I wasn't going to let someone beat me, not one person beat me. So,
Well, looking at Minnesota at that time, I mean, the culture was phenomenal with what Jay had built. The team was fantastic. Great wrestling programs have that tension in the room.
Yes.
Describe that tension in the fine line of being teammates and knowing when to get to work.
Right. No. When it was time to work, it was time to work. And if you weren't, you were going to get it put on you. I mean, there was many times where fists flew because someone was being cheap or trying to cut a corner. And not me in particular, just across the room. It didn't matter who it was. If you weren't doing what you were expected to do, or you weren't doing your best, you were going to find out. from a teammate most of the time. I mean, not that Jay or Marty or Joe Russell or one of those guys wouldn't chew your ass. Well, Joe didn't really chew your ass. His was more like a joking, but that cut almost worse coming from him when he was disappointed. But the other our teammates were just so dialed in and cared so much. I mean, about their own performance, but about the team performance. So there was just no cutting corners. It was just the culture of you do everything right, you do it as hard as you can, as best as you can, and if you don't, you're going to get called on it. So
What is something about the teams that you were on, Cole, that is underappreciated?
Good question. I would say there were team members that were definitely underappreciated. And by myself at the time, I think like guys like Justin Brownson, who I'm sure a lot of people maybe don't know, but he was a guy who came in every day and worked super hard, and maybe just wasn't quite at the level that a couple of us were. But he'd push you and he'd be in your face the whole time and he'd try to get you better. And he was like your true teammate. Like he was come Big Tens, he wasn't stepping on the mat, but he was going to be in the front row yelling, cheering you on after, taking beatings or giving beatings on Sunday to you for the last 4 years. And we had a number of those guys. And I would say that aspect, you see the 10 starters and those were, the guys, but it's like, there's 30 people behind them that are putting in really good hard work and pushing those 10 to get to a high level, and just completely selfless. Like truly we're happy for people when they accomplish goals. And guys like that, completely underappreciated. And by myself at the time, looking back now, I appreciate it a hell of a lot more than when I did, or when I was in it. But he was always good. Like Bronson is an example because he was a guy I trained with, but always a good teammate, always a good person. Really liked him as a person. But don't get me wrong, when I got a chance to pile drive his ass in practice, I did. Maybe a couple times a little too cheap, but that didn't stop him the next day from being on the edge of the mat, pumped that something went well for me, it was the guys like that we had in the room for sure, in my mind.
What loss, and you didn't have many of them, I think you might add 13 in your career. If I read correctly, it was, 10 of those as a freshman. What loss did you learn the most from? And what loss bothered you the most?
Learned the most from losing the Mako NCAA finals sophomore year. Made a couple simple errors, like middle school errors in the match. I mean, probably not really middle school errors, but just some transitions and positions that were just dumb. I lost focus. Like one thing that I was usually really good at was I stayed in the moment and I was really focused on the task at hand. And there was a couple of seconds in that match where I lost focus and it ended up costing me the match. And he was a better wrestler that day. So the one that bothered me the most was losing to Cain Velasquez down at Arizona State, because I got dinged for stalling like 4 times, I think, in the third period. But don't get me wrong, I was stalling my ass off, but they shouldn't have called me that much. Like, come on, at least hit me in the seconds. You don't need to rack them all off in the third. I ended up losing by a stalling point. I think the final score was like 6-5 or something, and like he got 4 stalling points. I was glad my dad wasn't there to see that, because he would probably came down on the mat and give me a lick in there. But that one bothered me the most. Not the rest fault. I mean, I was more just kind of pissed off at myself that I couldn't at least fake enough action not to get stalled that much. But
you were 4th at the NCAA tournaments, your redshirt season.
Yep.
What do you remember from that tournament?
I hit my only standing Grammy in my life in the blood round. Yeah. First and last. But no, that was My freshman year, I took 10 losses, and I took the majority of them by national duels at the time. So basically the first weekend of January. Um, and then after that, things started to click. I started to really understand, college wrestling situations, and I was just a lot more mat aware and sharp when I was out there, as far as not giving up cheap points. And I started to win the gritty matches, and that NCAA tournament was a series of gritty matches for me. I mean, I lost in the quarters to Leon's Crump from Oklahoma, big boy. Got extended out on a single leg and whatever, gave up the go behind. And then just wrestling through the backside, it was a series of very tight matches where you just couldn't. At that point, I wasn't good enough where I could separate myself from the pack. So every match was like a 1 point match, and coming through that backside was definitely what I remember the most. And working my way back to the third place match to wrestle Leon Scrump and then shoot a shitty single and get extended out for a go behind to lose the exact same way was nice. But no, he was good. He was a good big guy and a good person. But no, I definitely just recall that backside, and every match was a battle from basically the consolation round to 8 and all the way through. So
You win 2 national titles, obviously, but I'm always so impressed, Cole, with the backside, because it's an easy time, I can only imagine, to feel sorry for yourself, to quit, but to pull it together and be gritty and tough. I think there is so much honor. I think honor is on the backside, coming back and getting the next best thing, fighting for your team. How would you describe the honor wrestling on the backside? What were you telling yourself at that time, pulling it together and going out and getting it?
yeah, I mean, honestly, I was probably the most motivated. I mean, that I had been at that point in the season for sure, when I hit the backside there, and it was do or die situation. And just I was probably more amped up for those matches on the backside than I had been for anything else season. Just knowing it was going to be a fight, and knowing that if I run 4 matches here or whatever, 5 matches, I can get myself to third place, which would still be a decent freshman season. Obviously I didn't get there, I got 4th, but every time I was attacking something, it was like the goal is to win this situation, this match, this minute, this period, whatever. But I on the prize of getting to the top or this or that. So when I hit the backside, obviously you lose the chance at a title, but next best thing is third, and not placing wasn't an option in my mind. And I knew those matches were going to be something, just because everyone I think is thinking the same thing, and it's really a battle of wills on the backside, and who can stay in the zone and be the last to break. So
if you could go back and give yourself advice as a true freshman going to Minneapolis, what advice would you give yourself?
I honestly don't think I'd change a thing. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I did some good things. I did some dumb things, learned from both of them. And one thing when I look back is like, I think I put in about the maximum amount of effort that I could at that point, just from a physical and mental capacity. So I don't have regrets in that. Now would I like to change some matches around? Of course. I mean, who wouldn't, right? But I don't know that I'd give myself too much advice beyond just go to class. Like, don't get sidetracked with school nonsense that is going to slow you down from what you're actually trying to focus on. Because that did mess up like a couple months there in the front half of my true freshman year, just because I really never went. I just woke up, went to wrestling, basically went back to wrestling, and went home. I would probably say something to myself about that, but otherwise, as far as like the training aspect, the social, the camaraderie with the team, I mean, I thought those things were great. I mean, good or bad. I don't think I'd change anything.
Sophomore year, you win Big Ten title. You fall to Mako. You alluded to it earlier in that national final. What stung the most? What do you remember from that night being so close, but falling a little bit short?
Man, I was really just disappointed in myself, and he was the better wrestler than me at that time. So, I mean, I probably really shouldn't be that disappointed. But where I made my middle school error was I was on a single and I attacked at the hip on the backside to finish. Just trying to rush through it and try to sneak the points to win. And Marty managed to get the still image of that and have that put on my All-American plaque of me changing off incorrectly. And he hands it to me at the banquet and says, "Have fun looking at that the rest of your life." I was like, "Oh, jeez." Thanks, Marty.
No kidding.
No, not kidding. Also not kidding. I have no idea where that All-American plaque is and couldn't care less if I see it. But no, I mean, that was good. It was a good learning experience. Like I said earlier, he was better than me at that point. I needed to make changes, and I learned that the hard way, and I made those changes in the off season for the next year. So I would love to have 3 titles, but I didn't get it because I didn't earn it. So that's all right.
That next year, you beat him, what, 3 times?
Yeah, well, 4 if you count the All-Star duel, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you put into words the rivalry, Cole Konrad, Steve Mako? Give me your peel the onion back on this one, Cole. Give me the truth on this. I mean, describe it from your perspective.
I hated him. Like when I went out there, we're either going to be super physical wrestling or it's going to turn into a fist fight. Like I didn't care, but we were going to beat each other up. And now don't get me wrong, like talk to him years later, great guy. Like, but I know he felt the same about me. Like that was a rivalry. We knew we were the 2 big dogs at the time. And it was going to come down to us when it mattered. And it did at national duels finals. It came down to me versus him to win the national duels. It came down to me versus him in the NCAA finals again. And every time, you know, we hated each other. I will say, like mentally, when I won in the All-Star duel, I knew I had him then. Now he probably didn't feel that way, but in my mind, never losing again. I got him. So I came with a lot more almost arrogance every time, and it just grew every time I wrestled him after that. So
when did you guys at some point cross paths after your careers were over? Like, what was that like? Because I would have killed to have seen that exchange. Because like you said before, I mean, I remember watching the ESPN and, you know, the Bear, he's from New Jersey. I mean, he wants to, you know, destroy you in front of your family. I mean, he was a bad dude. And I met him once at the World Championships in Vegas in 2015. And I was shocked at what a nice guy he was. I mean,
it's super nice.
I couldn't believe how nice of a guy he was. Talk about your experience getting to know him a little bit after that, you know, your competition days.
Right. Yeah, no. So obviously, like I said, we didn't really care for each other when we were competing, but talked with him a few years later. I know once out at the OTC, I was wrestling some Greco at the time. He was freestyle, so we weren't competing anymore. So talking there, super nice guy, but then ran into him at it might have been like some UFC fights or something like some MMA related stuff. I feel like that I ran into him and just kind of just BSing with him, and yeah, super good guy. I think I saw him at Fargo then maybe 2 years ago as well, a little bit and chatted with him, but yeah, totally different than what I had in my head 15, 20 years ago. But
what would you tell yourself, Cole, before NCAA finals? What was the mindset? What was the inner dialogue?
I was probably a lot different than a lot of people. Like, I wasn't like a big hype man. I didn't like, for me, it was better just to be completely distracted and then like Marty or JB, I'm like, "Hey, you're up," and I'd walk out. like it was much better for me to just completely be out of the element, and then when it was go time, just go. Don't think, just act, react. You know, have it on autopilot. Like if I started thinking, I would slow myself down. I would not perform well. So the coaches recognize that. Joe Russell was almost always next to me when I was like warming up for matches, telling the lamest jokes you've ever heard. That were so stupid you couldn't help but laugh. And it just kind of completely pulled me out of the situation. And then, you know, he'd keep that going until like literally 10 seconds. All right, hey, take your sweatshirt off. You got to go. And then I'd just get to it. And I know that's different than a lot of people. A lot of people are psyching themselves up, and the more just relaxed, kind of just in my element with some friends, the better I perform. And I probably didn't learn that until a little bit later about myself. Like I started to figure it out sophomore year, but it was like, yeah, for me, the more distraction, the better. And it was the same way fighting too. Actually, interesting. For one of the MMA matches with Bellator, for whatever reason, they were doing like a heart monitor thing to see like how like what people's rate was like prior to going out. In my heart rate as I was walking out to the ring was at a 52. Afterwards, the guy's like, "You should have been asleep." I was like, "No, I mean, I had my warm up, and then I just was relaxing, having fun with friends, and then it was just time to fight." But that was just like how I perform better. You know, for me, it was just stay completely calm, distracted, and then when it's time to go, I mean, bringing it wasn't an issue because that's how we practiced. Every day we practiced as hard as you can, nonstop, grinding. So when the whistle blows, I'm going nonstop as hard as I can. But if I have to sit and think about it or overanalyze, or like I never watched film on people, I'd watch some of my own just, you know, to get better. But I never watched film on other people because I don't care what they do. I'm not going to sit and think about what they do. They need, you know, I'm really good at what I do. And if they want, they can try to figure out how to stop it. But I'm not going to waste my time or mental capacity worrying about some shot or setup that the person does to me. It's like, I'm doing my thing. I'm imposing my will. And I didn't have to think about it. It was natural. It was just created from repetitions over and over in the room. So when it's time to go, it's time to go.
What do you remember from winning that first national title? He beat Mako. I think it was 5-2. As you said, that was the fourth time you beat him that season. What stands out when you reflect on that match almost 2 decades later?
That was really gratifying. I mean, just kind of reaching the pinnacle of NCAA wrestling, and the work that went into it to get to that level. That was one of the few matches where I was like legitimately pretty pumped up that I won. And yeah, no, it was just a great experience feeling. I mean, everything happens so fast in that it's like everything's kind of a fog. I know you kind of hear that all the time, but it's super true. Like if you ask me a situation in the match, no idea, don't have a clue. I'd have to watch it to remember. But afterwards, I had no idea really what happened, other than I remember when there was like 10 seconds left and I got this, and then I was getting pumped up. But yeah.
You ever go back and watch matches?
I really don't. I'll watch like if I see something on like Twitter or something, I might watch like a couple like highlight things, not just of myself, but like if they'll have like I watch a lot of wrestling, so once in a while some of my stuff will come up in some of those things, and I won't like turn it off, but I don't watch like old films of myself. I would guess my son probably will at some point. I mean, I have them somewhere. And as he gets more and more into wrestling, I'm sure he'll want to put them in and watch. But yeah, I don't even have any of my. I wasn't joking. I don't know where any of my like All-American awards or anything are. Like I
You
don't.
really don't, because that was one of my questions. Cole was going to ask you, where are the Big Ten trophies? Where are the plaques? Where are the wall charts? You don't know where any of it is?
No, I assume probably my dad might have some at his house. The only one that I do have is the Jesse Owens Big Ten Athlete of the Year. That one just because I thought it was a cool trophy. But it's just down. Oh, it's like the doorstop for my sauna. I don't. It's not like up somewhere. But yeah, the other stuff I don't really know where it's at. It might be in a box down in storage somewhere or something, but I've just never looked. I mean, I lived it. I don't need to look at it. So yeah.
When you think back in your career, you did some pretty amazing things. I mean, what are you most proud of? I mean, is there something that you look back and you go, you got a little pride in?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm proud of my wrestling career just in general. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a match or anything like that, but just the body of work. Like I'm proud of the effort that went into it and the end results, and proud of my teammates and the relationships made and their accomplishments, and you know, just even in beyond the wrestling room, just the environment. I mean, I met my wife in the training room. She was playing soccer at Minnesota at the time. Naturally, I had to walk through in the fall to see the new freshman girls and who were getting taped up, and one thing led to the next. You know, so it's like just the whole experience wasn't bad.
Sure,
So,
sure.
yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm definitely proud of a lot of the accomplishments in not just like accolades, but just the whole thing. So it was good, but there's not one thing in particular necessarily that stands out. But
You get to the top again as a senior. It's got to be one of the quickest falls in NCAA tournament history. I mean, it's got to rank up there. I think less than 2 minutes. You know, talk about putting a cap on a career. Your 76th straight win. You know, second national title. What stands out from that night, and what was most critical in staying on top and being even more dominant?
Yeah, I think it was so competitive with Mako in particular, but I mean Wagner was no slouch, Cain Velasquez was no slouch. Like I was constantly kind of chasing those guys. I mean, finishing fourth as a junior in high school, they were a year ahead of me. They were all heading off to college. Mako beat my ass at Fargo. I'd never been teched before. I got teched by him in the second period, which was just embarrassing. Like I was like embarrassed to look at my parents, my coaches, and that loss in particular stuck with me the longest. And like I was chasing those guys so hard that once they kind of cleared out, I think I had separated myself from kind of the rest of the pack at that point, with all those guys gone. So for me, it just the game plan didn't change. I was still pushing myself. I was competing against myself. So it wasn't like I didn't look at it like I was on the top of a mountain and people were chasing me or anything like that. It was more like I'm chasing myself here, and I was pushing myself, and I was never concerned about losing. It never entered my mind that I might lose a match. Well, junior or senior year, but senior year in particular, I knew I had the ability to turn it on and win when needed. So yeah, I don't know. NCAA finals went fairly quick, but I kind of felt like I could more or less do that in most matches at that point. So
I got to ask you this.
mm-hmm.
It's a 4-man go. We're going to throw Garrett Lowney in there, maybe a little undersized.
Yeah, he's giving up a couple.
Because he's tough as nails and he'll be fine. Garrett Lowney, Tony Nelson,
No.
Cole Konrad, Gable Steveson. All 4 of you guys are in your prime. I want you to tell me how that goes.
Well, Gable wins. He's the one with Olympic gold. So he gets first, and then the rest of us just battle it out for second.
What is it about Gable Steveson, Cole, that you being at that weight class, understanding the level it takes,
Mhm.
What blows you away with how talented he is?
Yeah, I mean, he's just smooth, right? I mean, he's got himself to a level so far beyond where most people are competing, and it's I mean, obviously he's a fantastic athlete, but that also doesn't just happen, right? It's the work that he's put in to develop his body to be the athlete that he is, and how fluid he is and how well he moves is very unique. I mean, he's super quick, obviously powerful, but he's got a really good build too, you know, as far as like he's a little bit shorter, harder to get down, get underneath them, and as quick as he is, and he's able to get in really fast. And I mean, he's a fantastic athlete, fantastic wrestler. Yeah, and
And
athlete.
those hips, I mean, I think he could probably squat 3 or 4 tanks stacked on top of each other. Like you said, he
Yeah,
gets
safe
deep and
bet.
explodes. There's not much
Yeah,
stopping that freight train.
no, absolutely not. Yeah, I mean, he's built his body to be, yeah, explosive and powerful, and yeah, you get in the way, you're in trouble. So
What was the fighting like for you? You were a Bellator champion, undefeated in MMA. Like, what was
yeah.
that experience like? Beating guys up.
Yeah, not really a big fighter. I just I mean, not that I have an issue with it. I just I was training with Brock at the time because I wanted to continue to wrestle, but I had
Yeah,
student
throw
loans.
Brock in that foursome before too. Throw him in there too.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So yeah, no, I was training with Brock in like '08, because he was starting to fight. And I had no intention of fighting. I was just training with him because I needed a training partner for wrestling. That was the extent of it. I pretty limited on partners, and so I'd come in, he'd wrestle with me. Morgan would coach and wrestle with me too, and that was just kind of how it started. And just one thing kind of progressed to the next. After about 9 months, he's like, "All right, you can't come back unless you take a fight." I'm like, "Well, I'm having fun. I want to come back. I'll take a fight." So then that was how it started. I mean, I had no intention of fighting. I was not training with him to fight. I was training to help him and to help myself. Um, and I mean, I was actually in law school at the time, and it was not on my it was not on my radar to fight. But yeah, just kind of one thing led to the next. I was like, that's not so bad. It was kind of fun. So I just took a few more, and whatever, ended up with like 9 of them. So
Were you ever close to getting beat or not really?
no, not really.
You ever think like, what if, Cole? Like if you had to, if you were,
Oh,
I mean, do you ever look back and go, man, I could have, I mean, would you do anything? Would you do it the same way, or looking back, would you be like, oh, maybe I should have gotten more involved in that?
um, no, I mean, I don't think it changed too much. I mean, uh, no, it's never crossed my mind that I was going to lose a fight. I mean, good God, we wouldn't be talking today if I did. I'd still be hiding under a rock. Um, but no, I wouldn't really change anything. Like I said, I didn't go with the intention of fighting. I mean, I had some fun with it for a bit, but most of the fun was just the training. It was fun hanging out with those guys daily. I mean, we'd train in the morning, we go fishing, come back in the afternoon, train a little bit more, go home. During like the summer months, and then obviously I had some school stuff during the school year, but it was just a good time. It was like kind of having that same camaraderie that you did on the wrestling team, and it was kind of having that kind of your whole life, and then boom, it's done. And then kind of getting it back a few months later, a year later with those guys, and it was enjoyable hanging out with them. But yeah, I didn't have any intention of really fighting beyond. I fought more than I thought I was going to, because I literally was just going to take the one, because he's like, yeah, if you don't take a fight, you can't come back. So I was like, all right, I'll take one. But yeah, like my kids didn't even know that I had ever fought or anything before, until actually my mother-in-law told them like 2 weeks ago. She was watching them, and they found the belt down by the sauna and pulled it out, didn't know what it was, and she told them about it. So yeah, they just learned about that. So which is fine. I mean, I didn't want them to know when they were a little bit younger because I didn't want them running around school punching kids that didn't deserve it. But now they're old enough to at least know the difference. So, but
Cole, when you look at your entire wrestling career, when was your go earn it moment?
probably NCAA finals junior year was like the match I knew have a chance to do something special, get a title against a very worthy opponent. Like that was probably the one match where I was like felt maybe a little bit of anxiety, like you gotta get it done here. So yeah, that was probably the one in particular.
Cole, you're a tough guy to mat return, I have a feeling. It's going to be tough getting you up. It's going to be tough to mat return you, but I got a little rapid fire segment like to end things with.
All right.
Mat returns with one of the all-time great heavyweights, two-time national champion, Cole Konrad. Cole, what is your favorite musical group?
Oh gosh. Zach Bryan.
You being a big guy, obvious question. Favorite meal?
Italian. Yeah, nothing in particular, like most of it.
If you could meet anybody, Cole, dead or alive, who would you like to meet?
Probably George Washington. I know a lot of people say that, but yeah, just think he's probably a tough bastard too.
What is your biggest pet peeve?
Moving things on my desk, not this desk, but my desk at the office. I have a system, and if it's not where it is, I kind of lose my mind.
What was the first job you ever had?
Well, I mean, I guess growing up on farm, but first one I got paid for, J-Rob camp. I mean, barely. I mean, that was like $10, and usually I had to pay him 20 by the end of the week because he drove with his knees. So fighting.
You got a favorite sports team?
Packers.
Favorite Packer all time?
Oh, Brett Favre. Yeah.
Who's the toughest teammate? Just pure toughness standpoint, toughest teammate you ever had?
Jacob Volkman.
Outside of your kids being born or, getting married, and I would even say, even outside of your first NCAA title, what's one day of your life you'd love to relive?
Man, this isn't rapid. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, man. Probably first day of college, honestly. Yeah. Shortly after I got dropped off, a handful of the wrestlers came, made the rounds, and scooped us all out, and we went and had a good time.
What's the number one thing today, Cole, on your bucket list? What's something you want to do?
Two things. Safari in Africa, not a hunting one, just wanted the picture. Definitely not against hunting. Nice buck a couple years ago, by the way. Yeah. And visit Antarctica, because who goes there?
Outside of Mako, who's another guy that you just hated to wrestle?
Cain Velasquez. Had a gas tank. Always pissed you off because you knew he was just going to keep coming. It's like, get the lead early. Hope you don't give up 4 points stalling in the third.
Oh, that's great, Cole. About 30 seconds of mat returns. I finished the period on top once again. That was fantastic, Cole. This was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your career. It was a great one, and I really appreciated you joining us on the Gornit podcast. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.